everybody, welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing something a little different. I'm going to be baking bread here in Connecticut, February 3rd. It is 40 degrees and raining, so it's a good day to bake bread. Baking bread takes quite a few hours. It also helps if you're doing stuff around the house, so when you're letting it sit to rise, which is going to be an hour and a half to 2 hours, you can still be taking care of your chores at the same time. I started baking bread weekly since the prices of everything skyrocketed. So why pay $5, $6 for a loaf of bread when I can just go out and buy the ingredients for much less? I can double the recipe. I can have one loaf out and then one loaf in the freezer. So mine is a very basic recipe. It's a basic bread. If you were just baking one loaf, it would be 2 teaspoons dry yeast, 1 1/3 cups water, 3 1/2 cups unbleached flour, and 1 1/2 teaspoons salt. But over the years of baking bread, I found that putting some sort of a sugar source into the yeast does help feed the yeast. You can either use sugar or you can use honey. Today I'm going to be using honey. Plus it also adds a little bit of flavor to the bread. So I'm just going to go over the ingredients with you, and then we're going to start baking it. So in my bread I like to use almost half white and half wheat, just because to me it adds a little more flavor. I buy the jar of yeast instead of the individual packets. I use honey and then some salt. Those are the ingredients, that's it, that plus water. I also use my KitchenAid because I have one and I have a dough hook and it does very well with the bread. You could do it by hand. I just choose not to because it's quicker for me. I'll be doubling this recipe. So I'm going to be needing 2 2/3 cup water, but you only want to put about a cup in it in the beginning. And I found that if you have warm water, not hot to the touch, like for your bath or whatever, that helps, that speeds up the process a little bit. So 1 cup. Just some honey. I don't really measure the amount. Mix it up. It calls for 2 teaspoons. I'm going to put in 4. I'm just going to let it sit. You can let it sit for about 5 minutes. And then you're going to stir it to dissolve it. While the yeast is settling in the bowl, we're going to go ahead and get the dry ingredients going. So this calls for sifted flour. I used to sift it, I don't anymore, because to me there's no change. So since 1 loaf takes 3 1/2 cups, I'm going to double it to 7. So I put 4 regular all-purpose flour and then I do 3 of the wheat. Then I keep the flour to the side because we're going to need that to dust the board. And then 3 of the whole wheat. And this is a very delicious bread. I use one. I make one in the loaf pan and then I make one just regular. But today I made you 2 loaves of it because it makes great bread for sandwiches. I'll be needing that. Single calls for 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt, so we're going to put 3 in. I use pink Himalayan salt. I think that's a good flavor. Then I mix it. And I form a well. Just scoop out to the center. This is where the yeast and water is going to go. So it's been at least 5 minutes. Just going to go ahead and mix it to stir it in. And I don't get rid of all the clumps. It seems to settle when I put it into the flour and form my paste so it'll sponge. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour it into the hole that I made. And using a wooden spoon, you're just going to draw some into it, then you mix it until it forms a paste. Okay, so now I'm going to cover it, and since I heat with wood, by the wood stove is a great place to have your bread rise, nice and warm. So I'm just putting it here by the wood stove. It's going to take about 20 minutes for it to sponge. So it's just going to grow in size, and it's going to be a nice loose ball of yeast and water. So it's been about 20 minutes. You can see how it's bubbled up, nice and loose. Now we're ready for the next step. So we have the flour mixture here, and then we have the 1 cup of the sponge of water and yeast and honey. So the total amount of water that we need is 2 2/3 cup. So since we use 1, we're just going to use another 1 cup and 2/3 and add it to the mixture. I don't do it a little bit at a time. I put it all in, and then when it's in the mixer, when I'm forming it with the dough hook, that's when I can change it, the consistency, with either adding flour or adding water. So I need 1 2/3 cup water. Okay, 1 2/3 cup. Just going to dump it right in. So with a wooden spoon, I'm just going to go ahead and get it started. Just going to kind of get it formed. You can smell it. It smells very yeasty. Good smell. the dough hook in and just get it going. So it's already starting to separate from the bowl. I find that usually my mixer is just a little dry, so I always end up having to add a little bit of water. And when you start doing this, it's all by look and feel. I'm just going to drizzle some down the side here. Not a lot. A little goes a long ways when you're making bread. Feed this for about 10 minutes or so. So you can see it completely separates from the bowl. So it's forming a nice dough ball. It comes off the dough hook dry. That's nice. So it's a little sticky. You can feel that. I'm just going to bring a little flour into it. You want to be able to pinch it and have it come back in returns. This is looking pretty good. So I'm going to place it in a... I had to have this by the wood stove so it warmed up a little bit. I always put olive oil in it. Then I just roll it in it. It doesn't stick. So now I'm going to cover it. Place it by the fire for 1.5 to 2 hours. So this is the longest process of the whole entire bread making. 1.5 to 2 hours until it's double in size. Okay, so it's been about 1.5 hours, and as you can tell, it's definitely double in size. So let's bring it to the kitchen and do the next part. So we're gonna go ahead and punch it down. Let it rest for 10 minutes. Looking good. Okay, so it's been 10 minutes. Just gonna lay it on the cutting board. Remember, this is a double batch of the normal loaf. Cut in half. And in the bottom of the loaf pans, I'm going to put a little bit of cornmeal. You can use flour. So this is going to be there for about 45 minutes or so. Alright, so it's been 40 minutes and it has risen into the pan. Next step is getting them into the oven. I have the oven set for 425. I'm just going to slice down the center of these. Give them room for expansion. I'm going to put these in for 30 minutes. The book says 45, but that is way off. That would burn it. Been 30 minutes. We're going to do the old test, the hollow test. Okay, so you take it out and you thump it. It sounds hollow. It's done. That's it. The bread is done. I'm going to have this piece here. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. You can't beat home-baked bread.